Your morals are being weaponized against you in real time with your consent. Don't believe me? I'll prove it. Now, you might think that media manipulation doesn't work on you, that you can tell when something's fake news or a deep fake or propaganda, that you can connect the dots and see who's behind every corrupt and wrong thing happening in our world today. But you'd be wrong. As a behavioral and intelligence analyst who served in the US Army, I've tracked manipulation tactics across governments, media systems, and intelligence operations. And there's one that's flying under your radar right now that works every single time. It's a simple tactic called dehumanization. Now, I'm not gonna give you some touchy-feely BS about why we should all hold hands. We both know better than that. But I am gonna show you how dehumanization tactics are being deployed today to justify one of the most egregious land grabs ever, right here in the US. And I'll tell you what you can do so you don't end up a pawn in a game that's already rigged against you. Let's get into it. Okay, so first of all, what is dehumanization? It's a psychological process where a person or a group gets mentally stripped of their human qualities, their individuality, emotional depth, and their right to dignity. They stop being people like you and become a threat, an infestation, a burden, collateral damage, or those people. That shift is crucial to manipulation because neurologically, empathy is heavily tied to your perception. Your brain doesn't react the same way to everyone. It reacts differently depending on how you categorize them. And the moment that mental shift happens, they become a lot easier to hate, exploit, neglect, or harm. Now, this doesn't happen because you're a bad person, but because dehumanization creates psychological distance between your empathy systems and your emotional resistance to harming others. That's the mechanism. And here's exactly how it's done inside your brain. There are 4 brain systems that get hijacked in a dehumanization campaign. I want you to know each one, not so that you can memorize them, but because when you can name what's happening to you, you can catch it in real time. System 1, the amygdala. Your amygdala handles threat detection and it reacts in milliseconds, long before your prefrontal cortex has a chance to process events logically. It has to. That's what's kept us alive for millennia. It scans your environment constantly, including for social danger. So when the media repeatedly links a group to crime, violence, or moral decay, your amygdala fires. Fear activates and suppresses logic and empathy. Dehumanization campaigns lean on chaos imagery for exactly this reason. It hits your amygdala hard and bypasses your reasoning. Do you guys notice how often the same groups get paired with the same images? Crime, violence, disorder, over and over again? That's not reporting, that's conditioning. System 2, the insula. The insula handles disgust, and this one is massive because when a group is described with contamination language like filth, parasites, infestation, the insula activates and something critical shuts down: your moral concern. Disgust doesn't just make you dislike someone, it makes you stop caring what happens to them. That's why the language used to describe certain groups is never neutral, but deliberately meant to trigger your disgust. System 3, the medial prefrontal cortex. This region is responsible for recognizing the inner humanity of others, their intentions, their complexity, their individuality. Studies show that when subjects subconsciously dehumanize a group, activation here drops. The brain literally stops processing them as psychologically human and instead as a problem to be managed. And when they're mocked, you don't just fear the group, you see them as beneath you. And that's a potent combination. Which brings us to System 4, the dopamine and social reward system. Here's the one that nobody likes to talk about because no one likes to admit that they need the approval of others. Dehumanization doesn't just happen to you passively, it gets socially reinforced. Agreeing with the dominant narrative earns you tribal validation, the feeling of moral superiority, and the sense of being on the right side of history. That triggers dopamine, and dopamine drives you to repeat the behavior. If you notice, that's why mob mentality escalates so fast online. Cruelty becomes rewarding, and the more rewarding it is, the less you question it. Now let me show you all 4 of these systems activated simultaneously, right here in the US, to get you to look away from one of the most flagrant land grabs we've seen in years. The Puerto Rican government just handed $498 million in tax cuts to Rubin Brothers and Three Rules Capital to build a $2 billion luxury private city on the island, exclusively for elites, called Project Esencia. It's being marketed as a resort, but it's actually a secluded municipality for billionaire elites, complete with a K-12 school, places of worship, and even their own town center. Why does this matter? Because 8 years after Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico's power grid is still broken, leaving citizens with unreliable electricity. So the same government who claims it lacks the funding to provide a basic utility for its people, miraculously found $500 million to subsidize foreign billionaires. Why aren't more Americans outraged? Because when you're bombarded with specific images of Puerto Ricans, crime footage, disorder, poverty, your amygdala fires, your insula activates, and your medial prefrontal cortex goes quiet. Your brain is conflicted. Yeah, what the billionaires are doing is morally, ethically, and probably legally indefensible, but look at how Puerto Ricans behave. And suddenly you're asking yourself, are they really worth protecting? Wouldn't Esencia be a better alternative to what's going on there now? Without ever realizing that someone put those questions in your head. And that's the hijack. One side looks messy and vulgar, and the other looks clean and refined. So you give the pretty side a pass. And before you know it, they're not just taking over Puerto Rico. They're after your land, your water supply, your jobs. Because once it's acceptable to dehumanize an entire group of people, everyone's vulnerable to being next on the hit list. Mark my words, it won't stop here. This model is already being replicated across the country and has been for decades. Let's take a trip down memory lane. After September 11th, an entire religious group was framed as an existential threat. The fear was real. The outrage was real. But look at what you actually consented to. An almost 9-year war in Iraq that cost over 4,400 American lives. An occupation that cost American taxpayers over $3 trillion. And Iraq wasn't even involved in the 9/11 attacks. Then you got the Patriot Act, mass surveillance, and the end of privacy as a default right. Those weren't temporary security measures. They became permanent architecture built on a dehumanization campaign. And the people who benefited from that architecture, they never answered for any of it. In fact, they're still around. In fact, they've multiplied, pushing the envelope farther and farther and making billions off of it. If you're enjoying this breakdown, please support the channel and subscribe, because I'm about to give you 5 tools to protect yourself from this type of manipulation. So what can you do? How can you protect yourself from getting played? First, pause. The minute something makes you viscerally riled up, that's your sign. Not that the injustice isn't real, but that your amygdala is reacting to an engineered trigger meant to shut down your ability to process events logically. See it for what it is, name it, take a beat, and don't form judgments or take actions from that state of mind. Remember, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. The slower your emotional reaction, the faster you'll see the manipulation behind it. Second, track the language. Words like monsters, animals, infestation, parasites, these are reductive on purpose. They're designed to short-circuit your logic. The moment you hear that rhetoric, ask yourself, who's using it and what do they want you to consent to next? Remember, sticks and stones will break your bones, but names will never hurt you. Third, separate the individual from the group. You don't have to agree with someone or even like them to recognize that they're a person. Accepting someone's humanity doesn't mean approving their behavior, removing their accountability, trusting them, or pretending that they're harmless. It just means that your moral reasoning stays intact. And that's exactly what this type of manipulation is designed to compromise. Remember, all poodles are dogs, but not all dogs are poodles. Fourth, apply your standards equally. Whatever behavior outrages you in one group, ask if you hold a group that you identify with, or even yourself, to the same standard. That contradiction is where manipulation thrives. The moment you catch a double standard in your own thinking, you found the weak point that they're exploiting. Remember, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And fifth, follow the policy, not the feeling. Ask yourself who's amplifying your outrage and what they're asking you to consent to as a result. Every manufactured crisis has a preferred solution, and it's usually not one that you're going to be too happy about in the long run. So don't just feel the injustice. Find the policy it's being used to justify. Remember, follow the money. Again, this isn't about making excuses for anyone. There are definitely people whose actions are so heinous, they gave up their humanity a long time ago. But an individual isn't a group. If anyone tells you otherwise, it's because they have a bigger agenda. We all have our biases, that's normal. But it's important to have a hierarchy of values that prioritize what actually matters. Always ask yourself, what's worse? For example, is it worse to hear someone say something that you don't like, or to get rid of free speech altogether? Having clear moral priorities cuts through dehumanization tactics because they tie you back to your core beliefs, the system that protects you and helps you navigate the world. In 1755, Ben Franklin wrote, "He who would trade liberty for some temporary security deserves neither and loses both." He was talking about this very mechanism, the one that convinces people to hand over their freedom willingly by tricking them into thinking that the real threat is somewhere else. That's the playbook. And now you have a strategy to get around it. So what do you guys think? Have you ever felt manipulated into dehumanizing a person or a group of people? Who do you think was behind it? And what do you think their endgame was? Let me know in the comments. If you made it this far, you already know what to do. See you on the next vid.